Well, welcome to the program, which is Zoom Your Sales. Now, this program came about because I was sitting in a theatre. And I was sitting in a theatre in New York. You remember those days we were allowed to travel? It was just before the pandemic started. And I had up on stage in front of me a play that was being done, which was To Kill a Mockingbird, the great Harper Lee book that was turned into a play. And the play was fantastic. It was really going well. And I was looking at it thinking, I love, because when you're a presenter like I am and you've been doing it for years, what happens is that you end up watching things in two ways. You end up watching it from the point of view of just an audience member, but also as a presenter thinking, that was really good. How did they do that? How did they get that to happen? That was good interaction. So you're kind of multi-tracking. And the play went well. It was brilliant. The following day, I was watching TV and saw the same actor who was the lead in the play in Westworld. And I thought, okay. Now, when I say watching TV, I don't sit in New York and watch TV. That's a waste of time. I happen to be walking past the TV, happen to have Westworld on. And I thought, really interesting. He's still presenting and he's still acting, but his medium's changed substantially. His medium has shifted from down a camera lens to out in front of a group of people. And I thought, this is really interesting. It's a lot like what's happening in the market right now. And it was a lot like what was starting to happen before COVID and has now taken over. And that is, people want to do business and interact face to face, but it's now screen to screen. So I thought, what are the changes and things that are happening there that would make that necessary to be aware of as somebody who's doing business and developing new business? So, okay, thought, well, why don't we have a look at that? So I started to have a look at the dynamics of how that would work and what would happen. And so when I did that, I realized that there was something interesting happening. So let me just change screens and let me start working with you on this particular way of doing things. So when you have a theatre, what you have is you have a little, so you have a stage. You have a stage here, and the stage projects a long way out. So what you have is you have timing, and you have space, and you have feeling. You have a whole range of things happening. You also have some kind of control over the space and what's happening. So here you are. So here is your client here that you're focusing on, and this is you. So you have a big space you can operate in, and this is including wandering around, having a chat, making sure that you know what's going on, meeting other people. It's all that stuff we used to do when we used to go out and see people much more than we do now. And so what happens is that you have all of this space to be able to concentrate on this person here, which is your client. Now, the challenge with what's happening now with the way that we're doing it with COVID and post-COVID, because we're coming out of lockdown and that's all fine. But what we've discovered is that clients are now saying, okay, well, that's all right, but we want to do it a slightly different way. Clients are now saying, okay, you are going to be the one on screen talking to them. And so it's totally reversed. What happens is all of this timing and space and feeling and control, they are now reduced to this size here. They are now reduced to a very small package. And so all of these things have changed. Timing has changed. Now, I was actually watching this on one of those TV shows, one of those late night TV shows, I think with I've forgotten the name of the fellow in America who does them. And what had happened was, instead of being in a studio with an audience, he was now sitting at home with a screen and a Colbert, that's his name, whatever his first name is, can't remember. And Stephen Colbert, I can remember. So what had happened was that he'd been reduced from, here is the audience here that he can now see, to here is him, and his audience was now out here on plenty of little screens, all watching him. So he had to make sure, and what had happened was his timing went, because he's got no bounce. He's got nobody to laugh at him. And that makes sense. That's pretty much what's happening. And that's what's happened in the world. So in the world right now, a couple of things are taking place. The first thing is that we have made a monumental shift. And the monumental shift is that we have now said that about, and depends on who you go with, but there are results from KPMG and all these other people that do these surveys, and they're saying the shift is now about 80-20. It used to be 80% of what we did was face-to-face in somebody's office, going to visit them. If you're a consultant or you sell a service or you're a coach, a lot of what you were doing was face-to-face. And that was about 80%, 70 to 80%, we'll put it in that range. Now what's happened is that's reversed. And so it's now about 30% face-to-face and 70% to 80% screen. So what's actually happened is two things. Firstly, clients like you and me have said, we'd love to do more work screen to screen because it's more efficient for them and for us. Now, interestingly, COVID has presented consultants, coaches, small business owners who sell services a huge opportunity. And the huge opportunity is to make life a lot easier than it was. Now, I don't remember about you, but I remember just before we went into lockdown the second time, I had a client that I wanted to go and see. I thought, this is interesting, I'll go and visit him. He was a prospect, he wasn't a client. So I got in the car and he was at out at Norwest Park. Now, we have freeways and all that sort of thing. Norwest Park is about a 45-minute trip to get out there. It's kind of Melbourne to Frankston, if I can put it that way. So off I went out to see him. We spent 45 minutes together. And at the end of that time, we worked out, maybe this isn't a fit. Now, we could have done that before, but that wasn't the business model we had. The model we had was, let's go out, let's see what's going on, let's see if this works, and if possible, in that 45 minutes, we'll do business. So I got in the car again, 45 minutes home. Now, I wouldn't do it that way. Now I would have a 15-minute conversation, structured very tightly, and then make the decision whether we were a fit or not, and move from there. And so that's been the major change that's happened in what's going on. Firstly, there's been a major shift to reverse the contact pattern. But the other thing that's happened in this reversal is that what we've also seen is we've seen this change where the level of control that we had over circumstances, CONTROL, isn't it? Control has actually shifted so that we are now trying to manage a virtual environment. And that is the major shift that's taken place. So there are some things that haven't changed. There are some things that haven't changed. So let's have a look at what hasn't changed. Well, the first thing is, if we have a look at a business in the marketplace of what we do, you've got, let me just see if I can make that a bit bigger. Okay, that's better. Probably not an isosceles triangle or equilateral triangle. There we go, that might be a bit better. What hasn't changed is fairly simple. What hasn't changed is that we still have to attract people to our business. So when we say we attract people to our business, we still have to attract people. We still have to make sure that we have some kind of database so that people can, we know who we're going to talk to, who we're going to find. We've got to build that database. That hasn't shifted. The next thing that hasn't shifted is we have to make some kind of connection, if you want to put it that way, when we meet with them and chat with them. So we have to have some kind of connection. We call it a presentation if you want. I don't particularly like that term because I think it's more interactive than a presentation. And the next thing that we have to do is we have to make sure that we are doing some kind of conversion. I don't mean that in a Hillsong sense. I mean that we're making a sale and getting some kind of profit. Now, that's the standard business model. Doesn't matter who you are, what you do. The difference is now that, so let's have a look at the dynamics of how this works. If you are attracting people the right way, so if you want to go round this little corner here and you want to go, okay, well, I've attracted them. How do I end up with a connection? Well, you end up with a connection by making sure that you have some kind of engagement. The key to go round the corner is to have some kind of engagement. Can you engage? Are your messages right? Are they hitting the right target? Are you aiming at the right people? So that's the first thing that you have to look at. The second thing is, if you want to go round the corner here and say, okay, I want to go from we've connected, we've had a conversation, it's actually going quite well, to conversion. In other words, I think I want you to do business with me. Then the pathway to that is to go around this little part here, and that is make sure that there is some kind of impact. Okay. In other words, did we hit the mark? If we hit the mark, that's great. If we didn't hit the mark, we've got a problem. And the last thing, of course, is if you want to go around the last part of this, you want to go around there, you go, okay, well, the last thing is, did we end up with any kind of conversion so that we created some revenue? Because let's have a look at this in some kind of in order. If you attract the right people, so let's just have a look at it this way. If you attract the right people because you have good messages, and I'll break that down as to what they are, and then you make some kind of connection, and then you have some kind of conversion. In other words, you make you have a conversation where people want to buy what you have, then that cycle keeps moving. And that's the big thing that we have to be careful of. How do we keep this moving? And also part of it is, which is the area that we need to spend time on, because the areas that we need to spend time on are the ones that probably are the ones that need to be fixed or worked on. And so let me break it down a bit further in terms of what each of these sections needs in relation to how this works. So engagement's all good. Impact is all good. Revenue is all good. Fantastic. But what are the component parts of that? What do we have to do? So when we have a look at this, what do we actually have to do in these parts? Well, each pretty much we break it down into 3 sections just to make it easy. The first thing you're going to have to look at is you're going to have to look at what is the money model? What's the model of how to make money? And that doesn't just mean what's the pricing of my product. It doesn't just mean do I have enough sales? It is, how do I build the business? The major advantage of somebody who sells a service is this, that your profit ratios are absolutely reversed. So in a normal business, and in fact, I was talking to a client of mine on, what's today? Wednesday, on Monday, and he has 2 businesses. Firstly, he has a moving business, and the moving business, takes people from one place, puts them in another place. He also has a computer consultancy business. So what we were talking about was the absolute reverse of how those are structured. In his moving business, he has, let's say he makes $100,000 in revenue. Let's just do it simply. Makes $100,000 in revenue. Roughly 70% of that will be costs, labor, fees, truck hire, making sure that he's got all of his staff on board, insurances and all of that other stuff, marketing included. But it's about 70 to 80% of his income is costs. So about 20% is profit. In his computer business, it's reversed. It's about 20% cost, and that is for a small office, for a half a person to look after him, support staff, And then the rest of it is a marketing cost, but his margin, because it's basically his time and his ability to leverage what he's doing, the leverage factor is so high that he can now have 20% cost and 80% profits, which is great. So if you're going to do that, you need to have a money model that says, once you've got this money coming in, what are you going to do with it? It's not just the money you bring into your business, but it's how do you create what you want by using that money? Because in this kind of business, in a consultancy, a coaching business, in a small business that sells a service, mostly what you have is no asset or low asset value. So what you've got to do is to grab all the profit and then put it somewhere else. Well, that takes a money model. That's one of the things that we have to do. The next thing that we have to do is we have to look at what I call the 3 M's. And the 3 M's are, what is your message? What is the market that you're aiming at? And are you getting any meetings? That's the metric. Because as I said to you, in the middle here, the big thing that we're after is how can we maximize the amount of profit that we can make here so that we can build the life that we want, whatever that life looks like. Okay? So have you got the right message? Is it going to the right market? Are you getting meetings? And meetings is the metric. If you've got a message going out that is to the right market, if you've got a message going out to a market, is it creating meetings? Because if you're not getting meetings, your message or your market are wrong or need fine tuning. And the third thing that we need to have a look at when we're going around this is, because we are doing this face-to-face, but the face-to-face is now screen-to-screen, we have to do some tech up and setup. Okay, so the tech up and setup is about how do we make sure that you're not looking up my nose? How do we make sure that you can see me? How do we make sure you can hear me? Now, a lot of people go, well, is that really important? Does it make a difference if you can see me? How many of you have been to a meeting where you are on screen and people are more, let me just see if I can show you the difference. Let me just see if I can show you the difference. So how many of you have been to a meeting where the person you're working with looks more like, I'll take that cover off there. It's more like this. It's up the nose. And if I move that just a little bit, it's more up the nose. How many of you have been to a meeting where instead of the microphone being a good one, you can hear, it's more of a sound like this. And so it's up the nose and it's all over the place. And yet people are still looking at you down a camera, but the camera's down here. So it doesn't look right. Well, that's what we can do. It's easy to fix. In fact, because you've said you'd like to be part of this, at the end of this program, we will give you a special little handout that will help you do that. So, in other words, the low cost or no cost, what you need to look really good on screen. Okay, so the next part of what we have to do is to make sure that we are doing some building. This is pretty much your build phase here. And what you're doing here is you're building 3 things. You're building behaviors, because behaviors are measurable and manageable. We know what behaviors are, and we've created behavior maps. One of the interesting things that we've been able to do over a period of time, and I've been doing this for more years than I care to remember. I've been doing this since I had hair. And so one of the things we have is we have behavior maps. So we know if you do these things in this order, this is the likely outcome that you're going to get. So what we can do is to build behavior maps that say, this is how you build the behaviors. We also need to build a conversation. And we build a conversation because one of the major changes that happens when you are on screen, or one of the major changes that happens now anyway in the market, and this is why we coined the phrase the persuasion projects. And it's persuasion, not push. It's not pressure. So what you have to do, well, you don't have to do it. You could choose not to. If we go back here, the part that is the most important working screen to screen. And I can't overemphasize this. When you were here and the client said, I don't really, if the client said, I might have, what do we call them? Let's call them an objection or a concern, or they were just hesitant. One of the things that you could do is you could wait and you could sit and you could just go longer, because until you left, really, they couldn't do anything. Now, does that mean that it's push, it's pressure, it's prod, it's I'm not leaving until I'm finished, as opposed to what's happening now, where we do everything based on timing. And on timing, one of the most important things is it is scheduled. And the schedule is tight. So when we are working together with people screen to screen, they generally say you've got 30 minutes or you've got 20 minutes or you've got 45 minutes or whatever the size of the presentation you've got is. And so one of the things that we have to do very, very carefully is we have to make sure that there is buy-in. And buy-in is, how do we get people engaged in what we are doing? So there's engagement here, yes, but this is really, how do we get people involved? And I suppose if I was to say, instead of engagement, it would be involved. And if we can get people involved, then it makes the impact of what we're doing much, much more important. And so that's really the next most important thing that's happening, that we have to get buy-in. Okay, we can do that. So then we have to make sure that once we've got some buy-in, it's much easier to get impact. And this constructing of the conversation is really important, because this constructing of the conversation absolutely reverses what's happening. And it reverses what's happening because instead of you saying, I am going to sell you something, the question becomes, what is it you're prepared to buy? And the difference is, this is all about push and pressure and prompt. Okay, and so what happens is that the pressure ramps up over a period of time in terms of whether you're going to buy something. So let me just do that again, but I'll do it in a different color. The pressure ramps up. So what we've got is, we start low, but in terms of pressure, people feel that they finish high. Now, the way to do it effectively is to say, okay, if I can get some kind of level of understanding, then what will happen is, as we go through, I will reduce the pressure so that the pressure is about you buying rather than me selling. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. This is the crucial factor that's changed in what we are doing with screen to screen. Screen to screen, you don't have the opportunity to put the same kind of pressure on. The reason is people will cut you off faster than you can keep going. They will just disengage. So it is much more about involvement. It is much more about creating an impact where you are helping them discover insights about why they need your product or service, rather than just, oh, listen, yeah, this is a good product. It flips the onus of responsibility from them saying, I want it, to you saying, is this something that will benefit you? So let's have a look at that, because I talked about behaviors. Let's have a look at a behavior, because this really comes to setting up something. The other major thing that happens when you're going around this corner is trust. The thing that goes around this corner that lubricates this wheel, this is the thing that makes the huge difference when you are going around what's happening. That was really, I'm trying to think and speak and write all at the same time. What I mean by that is that there is a really important part of lubricating the wheel that says we have something that we can do together, and that is trust. because in a service environment where you have a service, professional service, some kind of service that you sell that is good for clients. And now I don't mean it has to be lawyers or accountants or anything else, coaches, consultants, we all add value to our clients. The challenge is that because we're selling, and they know that, we are selling, let's not put a fancy thing on it, we're selling something. So the question is, will they buy it? So trust is the lubricant. So let's have a look at behaviors. I said there were a set of behaviors. There are actually 24 behaviors that we have as a map. So that one of the things you can do when you are working with people, you can self-diagnose. Did I do the behaviors that I needed to do? So let me give you an example of a set of behaviors. In the persuasion mode that create high trust. So high trust starts here. High trust does not start here. Why? Because you've got to establish trust early. And you've got to make people feel that there is something to trust. So the reason is, if I am selling something and I am telling you I'm fabulous, wonderful, and exciting, in your mind, you're probably thinking, yeah, but you're trying to sell me something. So it could be a bit liar, liar, pants on fire. What do you want out of me? So let's just have a look at a set of behaviors. When you are starting a process, and I won't bother with the whole model because it's not really all that important. Well, I suppose it is, but the way that it used to be done, was that you would qualify someone. Do they fit? Qualify. Then you would pitch what it is you do. Then you would close the sale. Now that's pretty standard stuff. Qualify. Do you fit? I'm going to pitch. I'm going to tell you why we're fabulous. And then I am going to convince you that we are the right person. And so this is effectively the pressure band. So this thing here is the pressure band, the amount of pressure. Okay, get that? Good. Now, this is the amount of time. So if we take time that way, so we don't spend very much time doing the qualify. We don't spend very much time doing the pitch. Where most of the time is spent is doing the close. I don't have my thing's not as broad as it was on the other one, so it'll take that time. The way that we're doing it when we're doing it screen to screen, and this isn't new to screen, it's just become much more amplified because it is screen to screen, is that what we need to do is we need to see if we can understand our client. Can we understand them? Okay. Can we then get some kind of agreement about what needs to be done? Okay. Can we get some kind of agreement? In other words, if we understand them, and that involves having really good questions and having a really good interaction rather than a download, then if we can agree that these are the possible things to figure out what to do, then what we need to do from there is to advance to the next step. And there's a whole process around that. If this is the amount of time that we are spending on something, then this is the pressure point here. This is the pressure valve. And so what's happening is that we don't spend very much time doing a qualify. We don't spend very much time. We spend a little bit more time pitching, telling them what to do. This is the tell. And then the close is the convince. What it would be much better to do, and I'll do it all in green because it's good, is to do that makes this one here look good, and that's not what it's supposed to be. We do the questions, can we get some kind of advancement into what's going on, and then agreement, and then can we advance? And you'll see that the amount of time that is spent is roughly reversed. So here, what we're doing is we're spending, I don't know, let's say 20% of the time advancing to the next step. But here it's about 80% of the time pressurizing someone as to why they're doing it. Now, let's just do one little behavior. And the one little behavior I want to talk about is one that happens right here. So before we start, we have to do this fabulous thing called set an agenda. Okay, so when we're setting an agenda, why do we have behaviors, by the way? We have behaviors because a behavior is measurable and manageable. If you're running a sales team, as I have, and my sales team had 15, 16 people, we were running a budget of $800–900 million in sales. And the challenge was very simple. The challenge was, it was hard to watch them. You couldn't watch everybody all the time. And so what we had to do was we had to come up with a way of helping them self-diagnose, but also coming up with a map where we could say, did you or didn't you complete this behavior? And if you completed this behavior, then we could tell that you were being mostly effective in what you were doing. Now, I don't remember a video called Moneyball. And Moneyball was Brad Pitt and somebody else whose name I can't remember. Jonah Hill, could have been? I don't know who it was. And what they did was they decided, rather than go out and get people to recruit to their baseball team on their talent and their talent for being, talking up the game or the perception of talent, I'll put it that way, the fellow who was working in the statistics area said, why don't we just have a look at the numbers? And what we'll do is we'll build a team based on the numbers of what we know they can do. In the end result, they ended up winning the competition because they were looking for people that had specific criteria of ability. Now, one of the great things about selling is that people have to have good attitudes. The challenge is, how do you measure an attitude? Well, you can't. What you can do is you can measure a behavior. And so what we did was we set up 24 behaviors. And with those behaviors, we could actually monitor and manage and say, if you did 16 of those behaviors or more, your likelihood of getting a successful sale was much higher, and there was a frequency level of a certain level. So let's go back here and have a look at this. This is important. So when we're having a look at this, we set an agenda. And the whole purpose of an agenda is to create trust. That's the whole purpose of an agenda. So here are some things that you can now break down. And I'd like you to tell me, can you see some behaviors in this? Let's have a look at the behaviors that happened there. The behaviors are, we set a framework for the discussion. The next thing we did was we set a time frame. We got permissions to ask and answer questions. We also said there would be an outcome, and the outcome would be identified. And the outcome would be mutual. And the last thing that we said was that there would be a benefit whether we do or don't do business. Okay, cool, excellent. So those are 5 behaviors. We have 24, sorry, so there are 19 to go. One of the things that you can now do if you have that is to do 2 things. Firstly, this is called a trust frame. Now, what is the key? The key is you mean it. You can't just go and say, wow, here's what I'd love to do. I'd love to be able to point out at the end of whether I'm the right fit for you. And if you're not the right fit, you genuinely have to say, I'm not the right fit. You genuinely have to say, I am the right fit. I'm the person that can actually help you and sort you out. So once we've got that happening, the 5 behaviors we can measure and manage, because you can then debrief at the end and say, well, did we create the initial trust, which was part of our behavior map that we had here? See how all this fits together? We have a set of behaviors right here. There are 24 of them. Did we complete the behaviors? If we completed the behaviors, we then are likely to have a very good conversation. If we have a good conversation, which also has some structure, by the way, then we can get buy-in because we have somebody who has sat there and said, okay, I can understand what's going on, but I also have some insights as to what's happening. Okay? So that's kind of how this framework fits together. But the good news is that you could sit at the end and you could go, okay, yes, in terms of, did I set the framework? Yes, I did. Did I set the time frame? Yes, I did. Did I do the permissions? Probably didn't do the permissions the way I should have. Did I explain that there was an outcome? Probably 50%. And did I say that there'd be a benefit for each of us? Yes. So you can go and improve what you're doing based on the fact that you now know what you're doing. So the major thing that's happened online, virtually, as we're doing it here, is that structure has become much, much more important. And the reason is here. The reason is that this timing thing, this scheduled thing, if your structure is low, your timing is poor. If your structure is low, your timing's poor. So what happens is that at the end of your allotted time together, you haven't achieved what you need. You haven't discovered what you need. They haven't gained the insights they may have wanted. Let me just give you one question that is often the question I get asked most often. And that is, if you're going to do all this, how long does it take? You know, like if you're going to make this renovation to what you're doing, if you're going to tech up and set up and get this behavior things and you have to build a conversation and then you have to convert what's going on. Oh, that was the other thing I didn't do, by the way. I didn't give you in the conversion map what the pieces were. So in the conversion map, well, what you've got is when you go round this little corner, so you go round this little corner and you come here, what you do have is you have insights. I've already put it there. Client insights, potential client insights. You have agreement for what you need, and I'll put it up on the other thing, but I'll put it here, and then you advance. Now, I put advance. What's an advance? An advance is an interesting thing. So does that make sense? Insights, agreement, advance. Now, I say advance because sometimes advance, let me just go back there quickly. Sometimes advance is buy. Sometimes advance is next. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Well, what I mean by that is an advancement is we are moving to the next step in the process. Most often, the next step in the process is we'll do business. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it is we need more information, we need to investigate something. You've brought something up in our conversation that needs more consideration, and so therefore we need to get together and do things again. The reason that I'm saying that is because most interviews don't end with an advance. They end up with what's called a continuation. It's another behavior. Let me share with you what it is. Have you ever been to a meeting where at the end of the time you went, okay, so what I'll do is I'll send you some information. It will be, you know, I'll get you some stuff. I'll send it to you, and it'll include our proposal. And what we'll have is we'll have a chat when you've read that. Is that fair enough? Well, that is what's called a continuation. It's not called an advance. An advance would be, so based on what we've discussed, there are a couple of things we need to look at. I will include that in the information that I send you. And so that we both know what's happening in terms of some timeframes, could we schedule some time on Tuesday or Wednesday morning to go through that so that we are both clear about our next steps? Is that fair enough? Great. There are some other behaviors after that. I won't worry about it. The difference is a continuation. If you asked either party what's happening next, neither one of them could tell you clearly what's happening next. So it's, well, I'll give you a call and I'll send you the information and we'll chat after that. That's a continuation. An advance is, I'll send you the information on these particular areas. We'll schedule a time on Tuesday or Wednesday morning for a 15-minute discussion to go through those so that we can then decide what to do after that. Is that fair enough? Yes, it is. An advance is where both people know exactly what's going on and each of them is clear about what the next steps are. My view of this, having watched thousands of interviews, is that less than 10% of sales conversations finish with an advance. They finish with a continuation. Now, is that because the salespeople are too concerned that they don't want to put pressure on something, or they're not sure that they've really hit the mark? I don't know what it is. I suspect it is they just don't know how to do it, or they're not aware of what's going on, or they're just feeling a little iffy that, you know, we've got to this point, we're still good friends. I don't want to put too much, you know, push and shove on this. It's not about that. It's about knowing exactly what's happening next so that both people are clear. The advancement that we have here. So let's have a look at our advancement. The advancement that we have here is, we'd love to have a chat to you about what it is you're doing. And so there will be a follow-up, but there'll be an opportunity for you to have a chat about your business and what you're doing, rather than listen to me about what I'm doing and get some insights about to see whether or if we can help you. I guarantee, and I promise, that if we can help you, we'll let you know. If we can't help you, we'll let you know that too and put you in touch with someone that can help you better than we can. If there's any help required at all, because it could be we're just having a chat, we can give you a hand with something and that's all that needs to be done. If that's the case, great. If it's not, let's investigate further. It's been fun having me at your place. Thank you so much, and I'll look forward to seeing you again. Bye.